Welcome to the podcast. Nathan Newberry here, your host. I have Melanie Diesel here on the podcast. You guys are going to hear an amazing story for her. She's an author. She's a speaker. She helps people so much with coaching and online and corporate companies and stuff. You're going to hear a lot of the tactics toward the end. So stay all the way till the end because we're going to really dive in. You're going to hear her amazing story and what she does and how she helps people. Before we do, I want to give everybody a gift that's listening in on here. Down below in the show notes, there's a free workshop that I want you to be able to have access to. So many times people struggle with knowing how to make money online to get to 6 and 7 figures. And they need to know how to leverage AI, build a sales team, media team. I have some resources down below in a free workshop that will be really helpful for you. Go check that out. Melanie, thank you so much for being on. One of the questions I ask everybody right out the gate is, what is high performance? Like, what does that mean to you? How have you seen that play out in the life of yourself and the clients you serve?
I think high performance to me, I'm always looking at it from a creative perspective. A lot of the companies I work with are focused on creative projects or products that they're creating, and so for me, it's about being able to access your ideas when you need them. To me, that's the biggest thing, right? Because I think so many parts of our business and our lives, honestly, are optimized and systematized. And when it comes to accessing our ideas, too many times it's like, hopefully I have the right amount of coffee and like ideas will come, right? So for me, high performance is being in control of that process, understanding the environment, the constraints, the situation that allows you to access your most creative self when you need to so that you can perform at the level you want to.
I like that. I like that. And now, tell the audience here what you do and how you serve people, so they get some
Yes.
really good context a little more.
So I like to call myself a creative systems architect. That's really kind of the best summary of the work that I do because it takes a couple different forms. But at the end of the day, what I'm doing when I'm working with companies is helping them optimize their internal processes to allow for creativity to happen. I
Mm.
find that a lot of times we're really focused on financial outcomes, we're focused on efficiency, and sometimes in that process, we sort of lose sight of the conditions that allow for innovation and disruption and good ideas. And so a lot of times it's taking a look at those processes and seeing where can we allow creativity to thrive without the having a negative impact on our productivity or our bottom line. So really kind of looking at those systems and fine tuning them. And then with individuals, I'm sort of doing the same thing. I'm like, let's look at your ideas and all this amazing intellectual property, your expertise, and let's turn it into something that you can build your business around, your own proprietary model or framework, whether that's like a pyramid or a matrix or a flywheel, like finding a structure that helps your ideas be delivered more powerfully and be remembered more easily, because that's ultimately what's going to allow you to build a brand around your ideas rather than just having sort of a spark of a good idea that floats away in the wind.
That's cool. That's cool. Talk about a little bit about your origin story of like how you became this success, like how you started your book, how you started speaking, how you came up with this understanding of helping people and corporate companies to get to that success.
Yeah, it's kind of a winding path, which I think a lot of people have, right? You would never
Uh,
really expect where we're going to end up. But for me, I studied journalism because I really fell in love with storytelling and understanding the power that good communication and good storytelling can have to educate people, to motivate them. So that was really where I got my start, is learning the power of that type of communication. And it didn't take me long to realize that as much fun as I was having in journalism, there was actually a lot of need for those same kind of skills in the marketing and sales space. And so pretty quickly I moved over, and I had that role of really bringing a journalistic mindset to sales and marketing storytelling. I worked at the New York Times as their first ever editor of brand content, helping all their advertising partners tell stories that would be interesting to the audience. And then for the last 10, 11 years, I've been out on my own doing that work more directly, working directly with brands, teaching this stuff in workshops, corporate offsites and employee offsites, speaking at conferences. And then you mentioned I've got 2 books on the same topic, teaching people how to create content that's more creative, but also more trustworthy and more credible. So really focused all around on just trying to figure out how do we communicate more efficiently and access those creative ideas so we could break through the noise, because it's never audiences have never been more skeptical, like justifiably so, and it's never been noisier. So if you want your message to break through, you're going to need to do something a little bit different.
what was that breaking off point from working in a job to then going and launching your own company? did you write your book beforehand? Were you doing more speaking engagements? Like, what was that jumping off point looking like?
Yeah. So I had been doing a little bit of speaking on behalf of my team and my company. So I'd go and represent like the types of projects we were working on or give case studies and stuff. And I really, really loved it. I don't think I realized when I started that people could actually do that as a job. Like to me, it was sort of a side requirement of my current role. And so once I realized that, wait a second, I could be doing this all the time, I could be teaching people and having a positive impact direct to people who can use this information on a regular basis, I was sold. So um, my last year being in corporate, I was at Time Incorporated, which is a magazine organization, had 35 magazines in the US at the time. And knew that sort of the writing was on the wall for me. Like, I can't, now that I know I can have this bigger impact by addressing people directly, I couldn't feel as satisfied in the work that I was doing in corporate. And so I kind of started laying the groundwork, setting up future speaking engagements, getting, past clients who might like to work with me again. Nothing that interfered with what I was doing in my day job, but just sort of laying the groundwork for some future date when I was ready to take that leap. And I prepped for about 6 to 8 months before I made that leap. And the first year I think is often the hardest because you're still figuring everything out, or at least I certainly was. But I was able to get back to my corporate salary within 2 years, which was really really big for me, and I have never looked back. I don't think I'd make a very good employee anymore because I like being my own boss quite a bit.
Well, I mean, I'd love that you took 2 years to kind of replace that income. I feel like people balance both. They're like, I can't break off until I completely cover it,
Yeah.
and or like they're like it doesn't make sense because it's not. Like I think there's some, or even just the time duration. They're like, I'll do it
Yeah.
in the next 3 months or the next 6 months. When really,
It took
entrepreneurship
time.
takes years to kind of
Yeah.
get
Well,
to that success.
and especially if you are building a speaking business, like that's the kind of thing I think a lot of people think you can just decide one day to be a speaker and start charging 10K, 20K. And like it definitely does not work like that. You've got to start out at a much smaller fee rate. And at that point, like it takes a lot of gigs at, one, two, three, four, $5,000 pre-tax. You got to set a lot of that aside, to earn back what you were making in any sort of, decent corporate job. And I was very, very blessed that I was well paid in those corporate jobs. So I did have enough of a nest egg, enough of like a runway to give myself time to earn that back. If I weren't in such a place of privilege to be able to do that, I probably would have had to stay in my full time job a lot longer to kind of build that up to a point where I could have that, fill that gap while I knew it was going to take a while to pick up.
Yeah. When did you write your books? Was it during that same time or afterward?
No, so the books came later. My first book, The Content Fuel Framework, came out in 2020, the end of February 2020. Not sure if anyone remembers. Maybe you've blocked it out. Not a great time to be promoting something. I had like a whole book tour planned out and all this stuff, and everything was canceled, right? All my speaking gigs were canceled. It was really, really rough. Um, it was not initially the success that I had hoped it would be because there was so much else going on in the world, understandably. But that was really a function of people asking me for it. Despite the fact that I was a writer and I love to write, it wasn't something I was like really pushing for. But what I found is I was doing these workshops, teaching people these things, and oftentimes they come up at the end, and it's like, well, do you have a book I can go back to? Do you have like an ebook I can reference? And I was like, no, I should probably do that. Like that would actually be a great idea. So it came from the audience, the request to have sort of the content of my workshops in a book form. And I had my daughter. I had my daughter in late 2019, so it made for a really good deadline to say, like, I need to get this book out. I need to get the manuscript finished before she's born, so that I can have something to kind of come back from maternity leave. Kind of come back in and have my splash, my return, when that book came out in early 2020. And obviously, timing didn't ultimately work out the way we hoped, but it made for a really good asset. It was never something I wrote with the intention of like being on the New York Times bestseller list and like, appearing on Good Morning America. But it is something that has been an incredible resource for my clients and my workshop attendees. And so really proud of the fact that I created something super actionable. Again, not the fame and fortune that some authors are aiming for, but for me, it was really about making something super useful.
How was the balance between family life and going on all these speaking tours and stuff later down the road?
Yeah, it's actually something that I think I have probably a fairly unique approach to, again, because of the timing, right? Like my return from maternity leave was March 2020. That was the date I was supposed to come back. And I had a bunch of gigs lined up. I had this book tour. It was going to be like, I got a book, razzle dazzle, like I'm coming back strong, and it didn't work out that way. So it made it interesting because I had the gift of being able to spend more time at home early on than I probably would have otherwise. If things had worked out as planned, no COVID, I probably would have been back on the road a lot sooner and spent a lot more time away. But having that time at home early on really helped me understand my own boundaries about how long do I want to be away, what's the appetite for being away, because I got to tell you, like, it's a lot less satisfying to be out on the road, like jet setting, when you have people, plural, that you miss back home. You know what I mean? um and people who are not always as understanding. A partner can be like, hey, I'll see you in a few days, like, let's FaceTime. A kid doesn't necessarily get it and they don't want you to leave. So it was tough to figure out, but I think it was one of those things that was like trial and error. We have a rule now, I've come to learn, 4 or 5 years in. Uh, I try to be gone for as few bedtimes as possible. That's how I optimize. So if that means I'm taking a super early flight or a super late flight, so be it. I try to be home for as many bedtimes as possible. And my daughter counts my trips and sleeps. Is this a 2 sleep trip or a 3 sleep trip?
Yeah.
And we find ways to make it work. I think one thing that was really beautiful for me, this was last year, so it was 2024. I got a phone call from a longtime client of mine. I've done a ton of events for them, and they said, "Hey, look, we had a last minute cancellation. Somebody had an emergency. Can you be in Orlando in 2 days to keynote this event for us last minute?" And I had a choice. My husband was already on a trip, so I had my daughter with me. And I was like, look, I know you're in a pinch. I would love to help, but I have a plus one. So can we work it out? And it was so awesome. They were able to,
Very cool.
yeah, to cover both tickets. So I brought her with me. And that moment of getting to be on stage, right? And doing the thing that I know I do so well, and having my daughter in the back of the room being held by a fellow speaker and friend, right? Getting to see me do my thing was like, man, this balance might be a little more possible than I had thought. And without that last minute cancellation and kind of punting at the last minute, I don't know that I would have tried that. It seemed a little impossible, a little scary, but really grateful to have had that experience because it seems a lot more doable now.
Yeah. I want to ask you questions about content
Yeah.
specifically because I work with a lot of people that create a lot of content online as either a nurturing way to get their prospects to book a call and have a conversation with them, and or they have it where it's just nurturing their current clients. Like what's a good strategy that you found with content online as a benefit, or within the funnel, or with a client that you're working with, either that's speaking or writing a book? Like, how important has that been for the clients you serve and for yourself?
It's absolutely invaluable. I mean, I think, a lot of the work that I'm sure your clients, my clients are focused on is outbound sales, right? We're trying to reach people, get new prospects, get new leads, but there's a ton of value in inbound as well, right? If somebody comes calling to you and they've already read your stuff, they already know you're an expert, they already know you're the right solution, like, man, that's so much easier and so much better, right? It's a better process for everybody. And so oftentimes, there's almost an unlimited number of ways you can approach your content strategy, but a lot of it comes down to how are we giving our consumers, our prospects, the information they need to be able to trust us with whatever it is we're promising.
Mm.
And so that's the question we're usually asking up front. Is like, what does our audience or our prospects or even our, like you said, our current customers, what do they need to know to continue to trust us to deliver? And so showing your expertise, talking about the evidence that you're doing all the things you say you're doing, like those are some of the top things you can be doing to really just help them see when they're out there searching, like these guys know what they're doing. Like they're really delivering, because it's what I said all the time. Like everybody says, I'm going to give you results. It's going to be great. You're going to love working with me. Here, you're not a number. everyone can't be telling the truth. Like, so the only way to differentiate yourself is to lay that proof out, to really lay it out to bear and let them see, like, nah, I know everybody says they're fast, but here's the proof. We actually are fast. Or everybody says they get you great results. Here's the evidence of the results we're getting for our clients. It just goes a long way to helping you stand out, especially with how skeptical everyone is in the market right
Storytelling is not an easy thing. It's a skill to create,
now. Totally.
and then it's just something that you have to do constantly. I mean, it's like people already know my story. No, they don't. They just found you, and they probably need to be reminded a bunch more
Yeah.
times. What is there a specific like strategy or framework that you've found that works well with helping know how to curate storytelling?
Such a big question. Yeah, there's lots of approaches that are out there. One that people talk about a lot is story brand, right? Donald Miller. So it's a great approach to kind of figuring out how to tell your more holistic brand story. I'm often looking at it on more of an individual content piece basis. So, like one specific email or one specific blog post or video or podcast, how can we create a storytelling arc in that? And how can we pepper that story with the proof that we're talking about that shows who we are? There's really no one size fits all solution, but I think the most important thing is to really keep the audience at the center. It's really difficult because we know that our content is a sales tool or a marketing tool. But if you can come back to that, it's like, what is best for my audience? What does my audience need? What does my audience want? What do they know? What are they afraid of? Like, really keep the audience at the center. You're almost always going to come up with something that serves them, that provides value for them. So, if nothing else, that's the thing to focus on, I think, is what does our audience want and need, and how can we serve them with this particular piece? Because if you have that at the center, it's pretty hard to fail.
I know many of the clients, they want to build an authority in their life of sorts.
Mhm.
They want more impact. And so the easy branch, because it's free, is to do social media. But if there's people that want to write a book, they want to be more on stages, what's the best approach to kind of start out with that? And then how do you lean into it to kind of make it a full career like you have?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little biased because I know what worked for me. I know what's worked for some of my colleagues. Again, there's lots of ways you can do this. I think a lot of people think they're used to sort of the celebrity speaker model, and they think, okay, I need to have a dramatic story. I need to have almost died. I need to have like won an Olympic medal. Like that. That's the only way to build any sort of reputation. And I actually think it's much better, particularly if you're building a business that requires expertise. Build a reputation based on that expertise rather than some dramatic story that may or may not be connected to what it is you're talking about. So, one of the best ways to do that, in my opinion, is to create some sort of proprietary framework. So, that's whatever your process is that you take your clients through, like that should be named. It should be the Nathan pyramid of success, right? Or it should be the Newberry flywheel for leads, or it should be your thing that people associate with you. When you think about some of the luminaries who have built a business speaking, writing books, etc., in this space, they have those things. If you talk about Simon Sinek, start with why. He's got the golden circle, right? He's got that piece of IP that is associated with him. People know what he does because it's associated with him, his big ideas. So that's always my approach. If you can create some sort of proprietary IP, some intellectual property that is unique to you, that's tied to your expertise, that becomes the basis of everything you're doing. That informs what you're writing about, what you're posting about on social media. It becomes the topic of the talks that you're giving on stage. It becomes the theme of your podcast. It can permeate everything that you're doing so that you're not just more cohesive across all of your platforms and everywhere you show up, but you're more marketable, you're more memorable. And when you have that, that's where the reputation starts to snowball. Because what you don't want is somebody who says, I have a 45-minute slot and I need a human being to stand on stage for it. You need someone who says, I need people to learn this thing, and this is the person to teach them. That's what you need. That's how you get gigs, not by being a warm body for a time slot, but by being the go-to person for a particular topic that people need to understand better.
Yeah. What was the grind like the first few years leading up to replacing your corporate job? I mean, I think people think, okay, I could, like you talked about before, like I could just step in and be a speaker. It's like there was a lot of grind and rejection along the way.
Yeah.
Talk
Yeah.
about what you had to do to really kind of make that happen.
So my first like 6 months or so prepping to start speaking, I wouldn't say full time because I was consulting as well, but it's always been 40 to 60% of my revenue speaking. Um, it was a lot of rejection. It was, I think in my first 6 months or so, I applied to probably or contacted or pitched like 200 plus events, and I landed about 40, which is actually an insane conversion rate, but it's
Yeah.
because I was speaking for free. My approach was to take anything I could get for that first period to get at bats so I could master my content and feel really confident on stage, to get photos and videos of me on all different stages and all different outfits with all different audiences, right? To look really experienced and to build as many connections as possible with people who are in the event space. So it was easier to get yeses because I wasn't requiring a big fee. I was either speaking for free or to have just travel covered or for like, I don't know, $500 here or there. It was nothing major. Um, so yeah, it was a lot of sacrifice. That's why I was really lucky to have built up, and blessed to have built up that runway to give myself time to build momentum. And I really firmly believe that that's what helped me get the start that I did, because that event I mentioned that like called me up last minute and invited me out with my daughter, that was one of those first 40 events that I spoke at for free, that I killed it, and that they've invited me back to 40 plus events since then. Right. So it's like going out there and just getting yourself out there and getting good at what you do. That's the thing. I think a big mistake a lot of people make is thinking that they need to come up with a brand new talk for every single gig. Biggest mistake you can make, because you will never be a master of your content if it's the first time you're giving it every time you give it, right? Think about a musician. You don't go and hear brand new songs every concert. Like, they know it well and they perform it well because they've done it 1,000 times. A
Hmm.
Broadway actor is going to play the same role for 3 months, 6 months, 6 years. They're not going to do a different play every night. You've got to master your content. You've got to master the performance. And you do that by doing one or two things really, really well and not trying to be everything to everybody.
When you wrote your books, was that helpful to get more gigs?
Totally. Yeah.
Because I feel like I mean, it's not saying it's essential, but I feel like some events will only book you if you have a book. Am I wrong in that?
Sometimes. I don't know that they have that requirement, like it's a checkbox, but I think that there's a perceived value and a perceived expertise when you get to say that you are an author, right? And so if they're looking at two equally qualified, roughly equally qualified speakers, and one has a book, there's the implication that like that person knows what they're talking about, maybe more than this other person. That may not be true, right? That I'm not saying it's true. But when you have a major product based on your IP, a course, a book, you've won an award, like those markers all speak to your expertise and the value you can provide to their audience. And ultimately that's what they're booking, right? They're booking someone who's going to provide value. So the more signals you have that you can provide that value when you step on stage, the better your chances are of getting booked. And so, like I said, my first book, I mean, both really, I like to think of them as business cards. Like, that's really what it is. It's something I can give out as a thank you. It's a way for me to pass my expertise out, generously. It adds that, comma author to the bio that helps people see that you've got some real rigor behind the work that you're doing. Um, so yeah, I think it definitely helps. I think if that's not your thing, though, if you're not a writer or writing a book is not something that's, works for your model, then you can do the same thing having a podcast, running a newsletter, right? You just need some sort of substantial IP that demonstrates people listen to you about this subject.
Mhm. When you started doing consulting,
Mhm.
that was out the gate the same time you were doing this. You have now a program too that you have. You want to talk about that too for our audience to get some context?
Yeah, so the Framework Accelerator is a fairly new program for me. It's something I've been doing like one-on-one for a long time, but I hadn't really like productized it, which, it's funny, like the cobbler's children have no shoes, right? I'm out here telling people to do it and I didn't do it. Um, but yeah, the Framework Accelerator is how I work with people one-on-one who are trying to come up with that namesake framework or model that they're going to build their brand, their reputation, their business around. And it's the kind of thing, like I said, I've been helping friends do it for a long time. For me, I'm autistic, and so the way that I see information is in structure. That's just how my brain works. It's something that I'm very blessed to be able to have, and so taking that opportunity to say, look, you want to build this brand, you want to have a talk, have a book, have a program. Let's figure out what's at the core of your ideas and build around that, it makes it much more structured, much more buildable, right? Than just trying to try a bunch of different tactics and see what sticks. So yeah, I mean, that the consulting was sort of at the organizational level, but getting to work with individuals, at least for me, is so much more rewarding. Like it's so cool to see a book on the shelf that's, built around an acronym or a matrix or a pyramid or something, and be like, we built that, like we made that thing real. Like, how cool is that?
Yeah.
So that part is super rewarding. I still do a bit of consulting, but now it's more so working direct with folks, and then doing the speaking stuff as well.
With writing books and speaking, even to craft that your speaking thing, how long did that take you to kind of put together?
When you say craft the speaking thing, like make a talk or
Yes,
like sort
yeah,
of
talk.
build a business? Oh man. I mean, it depends on how much effort you want to put into it, and it depends on how much you want to get paid for it. If you want to be well paid as a speaker, then you need to have programming that's worth paying for, right? And so when I was first starting out, like I said, I was sort of getting at bats, practicing, seeing what works, and building as I go. I have probably 5 or 6 talks that are, like, in my back pocket that if I needed to tomorrow, I could get up and give. But that's because I worked on each of them for, like, 2 years or so, right? And I gave them tens of times, hundreds of times, some of them. And then once that goes stale or I feel like I've given that at a lot of places and I need something new, I start working on the next talk and get that one ready to go. So to say I work on it for 2 years might sound crazy, right? But if I get up and give a talk, I've probably given that talk, whether it's in my room, to a mirror, to a camera to record and watch back, or in front of an audience. I've probably given it 50 or 100 times.
Mhm.
And I've fine-tuned the language. I've fine-tuned all the visuals. I have jokes that I'm going to give the same joke every time, and I got to make it sound natural, like I just thought of it on the spot, you know? So it takes a lot of rehearsal.
Yeah.
It really is a performance, right? And so same thing, like if you were going to go see a musician and they sat down at the piano and they had the notes in front of them and they weren't putting any flair into it and they were just, it looks like a high school recital where they're just sort of pressing the buttons. It's not going to inspire anybody. It's not going to, you're not going to say, man, I got to hire that person for my next event too. You got to bring flavor and flair and fun, and you got to look like you know what you're doing and you're comfortable. And that takes a lot of practice. It's got to be second nature when you get up there. Um, I think a lot of people think it's memorizing, like just saying it over and over until you have it verbatim. But sometimes that actually makes it feel more robotic and less professional, right? You sound like somebody reading cue cards. You want it to sound natural. And the way to do that is to actually know it versus memorizing it, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
How much do you leverage AI with things that you do?
So one of my favorite things to use AI for is actually gap analysis. So because I'm a creator and putting the ideas together is my favorite part. It's not something where I'm having it write my scripts for me or anything like that. But what I love to do is put a finished piece in there and say, like, what am I missing? What perspectives am I not accounting for? If you are my target audience, what questions do you still have after reading this piece, right? Using it to get perspectives that I can't get myself, either because, again, like we only know our own lives, we only know our own identity and experience, and that's undoubtedly going to create blind spots and biases, right? So I find it really helpful for identifying those gaps. Um, and also for changing the formats of content. So just as an example, if I'm going to create, quiz questions associated with something, if I've already created the material, I don't necessarily need to spend the time to go through that and change it into test questions. That's something that ChatGPT can be really good about. Or a similar tool. So I'm using it mostly for gap analysis and then for like extracting or transforming. Turn this into, here's the full thing I wrote. Give me some ideas for social posts, or give me some ideas for test questions, things like that.
That's cool. How can people follow you and connect with you further?
Yeah, so I'm fairly well search optimized. I'm the only Melanie Diesel if you spell it even remotely close. So Deziel. You can find me on your social network of choice. I run a newsletter on Substack called Creative Constructs. That's all about the structure behind our ideas and behind creative work. That if you're creating anything, which you probably are, it will probably provide some value for you. So check out Creative Constructs on Substack. And my website's melaniediesel.com. So you could learn more about the books and the speaking and everything else there, and the Framework Accelerator there as well.
Perfect. I'll put all those things down in the description. Go follow Melanie. She's amazing. She has a lot to give, a lot of great insights. I think if you follow her on all our Instagram and LinkedIn and our website and be on Substack, I think you're going to find some really good resource. Thank you for tuning in. Melanie, thank you for being here as our guest, and we will see you on the next episode.